He's the one who goes before us and fights for us against our enemy. And while it was true in Joshua's day, and it was a physical battle, and it was something that we can tangibly say, yep, this happened. It was a historical moment in time, and yet none of us are actually, at least not today, we're not going to war, fighting a physical battle. We are engaged in spiritual warfare, and we do have an enemy that God says, follow me into battle against. And he's already won the war on our behalf, but we have battles that we face every single day against the enemy. And so we want to discover what it is to really be able to be a courageous warrior following our courageous warrior into our daily battle. So with that in mind, that's really the direction we're going to be going, applying the truths of God's promises throughout in these battles to our own lives today and what it looks like. So we'll begin in Joshua chapter 10, verse 6. But before we look there, let's go down. Father, I thank you so much that we can look back in time history to a real place, real people, and see how you were actually, really, truly involved and active in their lives. And to be able to see what you did gives us hope for what you will do and are doing in our lives today. God, I thank you that you are a promise-making God and a promise-keeping. As we study today, teach us, and encourage us, embolden us. May we find that your truths and your faithfulness is still very relevant today. In Jesus' name we pray. All right, so here we go, Joshua chapter 10. We're going to pick up kind of mid-story, so I'll give you a little background here in a second, but we're going to pick up mid-story in Joshua 10, beginning in verse 6. If I read the whole thing to you, we'd be here for a while. So here we go. Verse 6. The Gibeonites then sent word to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal, do not abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us. Help us, because all the Amorite kings from the hill country have joined forces against us. All right, so let's hit the pause button real quick and catch you up to speed where we're at in the story. All right, so Joshua and the Israelites, they crossed over the Jordan. They defeated Jericho, and you remember Achan took something from the plunder, and when they went to go fight against the people of Ai, what happened? They lost, and they're like, wait a minute, God, what's going on? You just told us that we would be victorious, and then of course it was revealed. Achan took some stuff. He was punished for what he had done, and they were back on track. They defeated Ai in this huge rout, and that struck fear into the people that were in this area, hearing about what had happened to both Jericho and Ai, these two great cities. And so the Gibeonites were, and this is, you can find this story in chapter 9 if you want to read it later. Don't read it now, because then you'll miss out on some other good stuff. All right. So in chapter 9, the Gibeonites deceive Joshua into believing they are a nation from far off, and they make an alliance with Joshua and the Israelites. And it turns out they were a people group that were neighbors to where they were stationed at Gilgal. And so they were deceived. That was a huge mistake on Joshua's part. Not that he made an alliance necessarily with the Gibeonites, which was a big mistake because they were supposed to totally either destroy or drive out everybody from that people so that they did not have neighbors that could corrupt them in their belief system with with God, right? God's plan was to cleanse the land and punish the people of Canaan for their disobedience and for their immorality and their sinfulness that had accumulated through the years. So anyway, so here they are, stuck with this alliance with a people group that they were supposed to, by God's command, get rid of. But the real mistake was not the alliance. The real mistake you can read about in chapter 9, verse 14. They made the alliance because they did not inquire of the Lord. How many mistakes do we make in life because we don't first ask God what He wants us to do? What's that? Yeah, right. Now, I don't have enough fingers and toes, do I? And probably not enough in this room to count all the times that I've messed up because I didn't ask. We go to God a lot of times. We run to Him because of the trouble we got in because we didn't ask Him from the beginning, right? So we find ourselves in trouble because of our mistakes, expecting God to fix our mistakes when, in the first place, we should have just inquired of Him. And that is the predicament that Joshua and the Israelites find themselves in this moment. But here's the deal, and it's a blessing to be able to have this conversation a lot of times with my kids. I'll tell them, and I wish this was something that I had been taught when I was a kid. Probably was, and I just didn't listen. So I tell these guys over and over and over and over and over again. So hopefully they'll get it. The mistake you made is not nearly as critical as what? That's right. What do you do next? That is far more important than what you just did. So the mistake that Joshua and the Israelites made with Gibeon is not nearly as important to God, as important as it is. It's not nearly as important to God as, well, what are they going to do next? And that's where we then pick up. If we flip over to verse 7, we get a glimpse of what Joshua did next. And what God did in response to that. And what we get here in this passage are two of the most amazing miracles recorded anywhere in Scripture. All right, so here we go, verse 7. So Joshua marched up from Gilgal with his entire army, including all the best fighting men. Why did he do that? Well, look at verse 8. The Lord said to Joshua, "Don't be afraid of them. I have given them into your hand. Not one of them will be able to withstand you." Okay, so the implication here, because God said to Joshua and gave him this promise, what can we imply about that? Before, Joshua didn't inquire of the Lord. So what do we know for sure here? He talked to God. He talked to God. And when he talked to God about this situation, this predicament that the Midianites had found themselves in, and asking Joshua to come save them, Joshua talks to God and gets his answer. And not only does he get an answer, but he gets a promise from God. Go ahead and go, because I've already won for you. Okay, so that's the promise that they can then move forward in verse 9 and following. It says, after an all-night march from Gilgal, Joshua took them by surprise. The Amorites, there was the Amorite army of 5 kings. The Lord threw them into confusion before Israel, and defeated them in a great victory at Gibeon. Israel pursued them along the road, going up to Beth Horon, and cut them down all the way to, I don't know, your guess is as good as mine. I don't know how these towns named. As they fled before Israel on the road down to Beth Horon to Azekah, the Lord hurled large hailstones down on them from the sky, and more of them died from the hailstones than were killed by the swords of the Israelites. And the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, O sun, stand still over Gibeon. O moon, over the valley of Al-Jaon. So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped. Listen, there is historical records from all kinds of different cultures and countries and people groups and nations during this time. You can read in historical writings of people saying that there was that the sun stopped, or that the day was long, or that their night, if they're on the other side of the earth, that their night was elongated. There is historical data and proof that people were confounded that there was an extra long day. This actually happened until the nation avenged itself on its enemies, as it is written in the book of Jashar. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to man. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. Then Joshua returned with all Israel to the camp in Gilgal. There's two huge miracles here, and possibly, see if you agree with me, I kind of think there was a third miracle that took place here in this event. The first miracle was out of the hailstones that God threw at the Amorites. It's pretty amazing. I mean, not only that God, of course, has control over hail and the storm, and I mean, good grief, it's His creation, right? He created the hail to begin with, so if He wants to command it however He wants to, He has the right to do just that. So here He is, He's throwing these hailstones at the Amorites, and He doesn't miss. What's also incredible about the story is here the Israelites are pursuing and chasing after the Amorites while God is throwing the hailstones, and God doesn't hit a single Israelite. Nobody gets in the way. God only hits the Amorites with His hailstones. And more of them die from God's precision in throwing these stones than He had a great arm. Actually, have you ever seen the movie Elf? The snowball fight?
The snowball fight.
I mean, that's, can you imagine God against an entire army just whipping these hailstones at these guys, and they're large enough, and He throws them with enough force that He kills the enemy with these hailstones. Absolutely, utterly amazing what God did on behalf of the Israelites in order to defeat their enemy. The second miracle, of course, was answering Joshua's extremely bold prayer here to extend the day so that they could finish the battle. I mean, think about, read what he says, what Joshua says, and how bold of a prayer this is. He prays to the Lord. Think about it. He's praying to the Lord, and he's commanding the sun and the moon. Did you read that in there? He prays to the Lord, and he says, O sun, stand still. O moon, over the valley of Al-Jaon. O sun, stand still. O moon, stand still. He speaks to the sun and the moon. Talk about boldness. And a very precise prayer. If you were engaged in a battle, would that be your first thought? Extend the day so we can fight longer. Right? I mean, that wouldn't have been my first thought, probably. I probably would have said, God, send some more of that hail so we don't have to fight so much. So we don't have to fight so long. Like let's shorten this thing. Don't extend this thing out. But Joshua prays something that defies all sights. But listen, God is the one who hung that sun and hung that moon in the sky to begin with. He's the one who holds it in place, according to Paul in Ephesians, right? He holds in Colossians 1. He holds it in place God's the one who put the earth on its axis, on just the right tilt, and is rotating it at just the right speed, revolving around the sun at just the right miles per hour, right, so that we don't either freeze or burn up and die. God's the one who did it. Now, how did he, when he made the sun stop and the moon stop, which means no longer is the earth rotating, which aren't we dependent on that for gravity? I don't know how that works. You know how that works? Anybody know how that works? It works pretty good the way it's working, right? It works pretty good. How is it that God could just stop the earth in the sky and stop it from revolving around the sun? How does he do that? I mean, God said, exactly, right? I mean,
He made it.
he made it, so he has the right to do with it whatever he wants, and he has the right to defy all of his own laws of gravity, of whatever, and all of his scientific laws. He has the right to do with those things what he wants and rewrite the laws, because he's the law writer. He can rewrite it however he wants, because he can sustain it in its place where it is, whenever and however he wants to. So you know, we try to justify all the miracles out of the Bible in some way or another, and I'm like, God is more than capable. He is powerful, and not only is he capable, but we've seen it work. And I think maybe there's a third miracle in all this also. Go with me on this. These guys, the Israelites, this was about 24-mile march from Gilgal to Gibeon. Okay, and obviously on foot. How long does it take to march a mile? And you soldiers know. How long does it actually take to march in formation? Thank you. How long does it take to march a mile? A long time, probably, right? Okay. And they marched 24 miles all the way through the night. They catch the Amorites by surprise in their battle, and then they on foot pursue. They chase the Amorites, and then God extends their day for an entire day, probably about 12 more hours. Has anybody ever even picked up an ancient sword? It's heavy. I never have, but I mean, I watch these, the battles like Gladiator, for example, on TV or something. And I'm thinking, how exhausted would you be in just one single, maybe 5-minute fight? Have you ever been boxed on a punching bag before? It's exhausting. And not only did they march all through, pull an all-nighter, and then fight for about 24 hours straight with their swords, I think the third miracle was that God gave them strength and stamina to continue fighting without collapsing and falling over with exhaustion. 3 miracles that God performed for this one battle in order to defeat the enemy. Now, as amazing as this particular story is, I think, as you read it, I think that there's a lesson here in all of this that we cannot and should not and better not miss. And it's a pretty simple lesson. Let me read to you Joshua chapter 10, verse 10 again. But I want to read it to you from the New American Standard Bible, which, without getting into this too much, the New American Standard Bible is generally thought to be the best translation for word, so what it says in the original language, the New American Standard Bible translates it pretty straightforward, okay? And so this is what the New American Standard Bible, how it translates verse 10. See if you can see the difference here. And the Lord confounded them before Israel, and he slew them with a great slaughter at Gibeon, and pursued them. There's three things God does here. That it says, that the text here says God does. What does God do? Number one, he what? He confuses them, right? Confounds them. He confuses them. The second thing, the Lord did what? He slew them, he slaughtered them, he defeated them. And the third thing, as they were running, it says God did what? God pursued them. God did these things. While it was the Israelites who were the boots on the ground, so to speak, sword in hand, it was God who did fighting and the winning of this battle. So when God told Joshua, go into battle, because I've already, you're going to win, I won this for you. And he told him that from the very beginning. Don't be discouraged. Don't be scared. Because I'll be with you wherever you go. I'll be there. I'll be fighting for it. Listen, the truth in this for us today is that God fights for us. I don't know about you, but there are days when it feels like the enemy ganging up on you. You felt that way? I mean, here for the Gibeonites, the 5 Amorite kings all came together and ganged up on the one city. Feels that way sometimes. I'm guessing what the saying is that they come in threes, right? It seems like when one bad thing happens, then all of a sudden there's another bad thing, another bad thing. And a lot of times it doesn't stop at 3, does it? It just feels like it just piles, the enemy just piles on, and piles on, and piles on. And if we remember this one thing, we can be strong and courageous, not be terrified of the enemy, and not be discouraged when he piles on. God fights for you. When the enemy piles on, when the enemy gangs up on you, God fights for you. Now, understand in the context of this particular passage, we're talking about the enemy attacking and coming against you, forming his alliances. You know, Satan is like a lion. He's looking for a way on prowl. He's looking for a way, looking for an opportunity to devour you. And we have a promise here that God fights for you. What miracles have you seen God perform for you? When you feel in distress, when you feel attacked by the enemy, when you know he's coming against you, have you ever seen a miracle of God? And maybe not a hailstone, right? Coming and whacking your enemy across the head and killing them. What miracles have you seen God perform for you? Because I'd like to see, what I'd like to have happen is for you to see God heal diseases, whether it's in your life or in the lives of those around you. Right? I'd like for him to just say, Sue, you're healed. It's gone. I'd like for you to experience that miracle in your life. I'd love for you to be able to experience the miracle of, I don't know how, but God, you paid these bills that I knew there was no way I could pay. I'd love for you to be able to see that kind of miracle happen in your life. When you feel overwhelmed and defeated by the enemy, maybe it's depression or anxiety that's attacking and seeking to destroy, I want you to know that God fights for you, and He is powerful enough to perform logic and science-defying miracles in your life. He's faithful enough to do it. He's powerful enough to do it, right? He's powerful enough to destroy the enemy. He's also faithful enough to not leave you stranded in the midst of your struggle and strife and suffering against the enemy. The question is, when you're facing down the enemy of your soul, the enemy of your life and spirit, are you fighting alone, or have you inquired people? And that's the starting place. If you want to see God perform a miracle in your life, don't you first have to go to Him? It has to start there. There was no miracle in the Israelites' life, in their fight or whatever with the Gibeonites. They joined in this unholy alliance because they didn't inquire of the Lord. So it starts there. But this time, Joshua not only inquired of the Lord, but he took his prayer one ginormous step further. He made an incredibly bold request of God. I mean, this story has really, it's really challenged me in my thinking about prayer. Again, you've got to understand this within the context of this is about attacking the enemy. He has challenged the bigness of my prayers, the boldness of my prayers to God. Now, this isn't, if you want a new car, pray a bold prayer. Okay? What this is when the enemy is attacking relentlessly, ganging up on you, what sort of boldness do you have in your prayers? Sometimes my prayers look too much like, God, I hope you will do, this is what I want, I hope you will. But, if you don't, if it's not your will, which is okay. I mean, that approach is okay, but you hear the timidity in my voice, in my prayer, and not boldness in what is commonly the way I approach God. I mean, think of some of the bold prayers in Scripture. For example, Moses prayed, and what did God do? He's got an enemy advancing behind him. He's got all the Israelites whom God had just rescued from Egypt, and he's got this enemy about to overpower and destroy them, and he prays, and God does what with the sea? Parts it so they go across. He holds off the enemy with a pillar, right, a fire. He gets all the Israelites across. Then he removes the pillar. All the enemy gets into the water on the dry ground, and God does what? Overwhelms them and destroys the enemy because of one bold prayer. I think of Elijah, who he's facing down all the priests of Baal, and they're praying to Baal to consume this altar, and nothing happens for half a day or better. And Elijah asks of God, consume the altar with fire from heaven. And what does God do? Consumes it right now and defeats the enemy, defeats Baal and all of his priests. I think of the bold prayers in Scripture, and I think, man, I wish I could pray like that. Because it's not like there was anything special or different about Moses or Elijah, except that they were called by God. Well, guess what? You are all called by God, which makes you the same as Elijah and Moses. And He'll answer your prayers. And then I think of some of the prayers that were not answered the way they wanted them answered in Scripture, right? Some very bold prayers. For example, I think of Mary and Martha, who say, Jesus, come, your friend Lazarus is ill. And what does Jesus do? Lays. That's enough. And I think of the Apostle Paul who begged and prayed earnestly. It says 3 times. And what that means is 3 seasons of time in his life. He prayed nonstop that God would take the thorn from his flesh. And God said, I'm not going to take the thorn. There's a reason. There's a reason why. What Jesus told Mary and Martha was, this has happened so that you'll see something greater. And when Paul prayed and it didn't happen, he was told, God said that my grace is sufficient for you. There's a reason why I'm going to leave this. And Jesus, in the garden, the night before he was betrayed, went to the cross, he prayed 3 times. Take this cup from me. And how did God answer? There's purpose. See, just because our bold prayers aren't answered the way we want them to, doesn't mean that God doesn't love you. It doesn't mean that God doesn't care about your circumstance. It doesn't even mean that God can't do anything about it anyway, right? That maybe we think he's not listening. It doesn't mean any of those things. For Pete's sakes, the Apostle Paul was the Apostle Paul, right? I mean, why? If God was going to answer any prayer, it'd be his. Mary and Martha, look, Lazarus was Jesus' best friend outside of his disciples, the 12. And Jesus was the Son of God. It doesn't mean that he doesn't care. What it means is his will for your circumstance in this is different than what you think it should be. And we are given a promise. For those who love him and are called according to his purpose, all things, good or bad, positive or negative in your life, will work out for what? Good. It may not always feel like it's for your good, but it's always for his good and for his glory. When our bold prayers, as specific as they need to be, and now listen, there's no way that you can know what God's will is unless you are first what? I love what is said about Joshua here when the sun stood still, the moon stood still, and nothing has ever happened like this before or since. And he was someone that the Lord, what? Listened to. In order to be someone that the Lord listens to, we have to do what? Be someone who listens to him. You can't know his will and pray his will unless you first know him. And then still sometimes we get it wrong. So the key for us in our bold prayers is I think I know God's will in this. I think I know that he wants this person healed of cancer. He doesn't want this child to die. I'm going to pray for their healing, and they're going to be well. I can pray with boldness and confidence, and still sometimes I get it wrong. Right? But if I'm someone whom he listens to because I'm someone who's listening to him and we're in relationship with one another, if I'm wrong, I'm okay with his will, even if it doesn't match up with mine. So we pray boldly when the enemy attacks, because we know that he's fighting for us. God is not against you. He's for you. God is not fighting against you. He's fighting for you. And when God fights for you, not only will he defeat and in fact has defeated the enemy, that you will pursue the enemy until the finish, so that you can be victorious in the end. That's the kind of God we have. He loves you so deeply, desperately, that He will also work the miracle, the spiritual miracle of strength and stamina, so that you can make it to the finish line when Jesus comes back. Find yourself in